today. I have Christy here joining me.
Hello, Debbie. Yes, I am indeed. I'm the lucky person who gets to interview you today. And as we go through, if anybody has any questions or queries, then you just put them in and I'll bring them up to Debbie as this is our first show. So we're really excited about running everything. So Debbie, why don't we, just to get everything started and to kind of set the pace, why don't you explain what everybody can expect from today's show?
Absolutely. So Beauty Talent Talk, the idea really came from this year. There's been so many changes in the beauty industry and so many conversations we've been having on a daily basis with professionals, both for searches, but also to provide insights on this evolving market and some of the challenges we're seeing. And I felt that there wasn't enough conversation around what has been happening from a job trend basis to the challenges, and it created an opportunity from a hiring lens, since I speak with so many professionals on all verticals of the business, to be able to have these kind of discussions, and also to be able to leverage some of the beauty executive coaches and some other really talented professionals that have had obstacles and challenges that we can showcase, that we can all learn from. So I'm really excited to bring value to our beauty community and to continue to help bring transparency to the job market moving forward. And of course, our discussion today on what to expect in the job market in 2025.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, at the end of the show, we are going to give some practical tips for people around next year to make it so that they get the job that they want, or indeed the candidates they want. So we're going to look at that in a second. Now, to begin with, I think it's a good idea to let's just look backwards. Let's cast our eye backwards and let's talk about what 2024 was as a year in the job industry.
Yeah, so 2024 has definitely been ever changing and it's been a challenge. When I look back at 2023, there were a lot of indicators of what was moving forward. I mean, the economy wasn't doing well, and then you had inflation that really got magnified this year, which caused a lot of conservative consumer spending. And ultimately with the election, it was very polarizing and it caused a lot of uncertainty. And the ramifications were, some of the beauty companies had to make some tough decisions. That was shutting down and unfortunately a lot of downsizing. And so that put more people in the market, and it was a pretty significant shift to less jobs, more people.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot of people are going to be happy to see the back end of 2024. So that's what happened previously. What kind of things can people expect in 2025? Is it a more optimistic outlook, do you think?
So I want to start off with these forecasting meetings that I conduct. So I work and have had several weeks of forecasting meetings across the industry. And the goal in these meetings is really to understand where the beauty company is on a performance basis. Where did they land in 2024? What are the challenges that they faced? And what does that hiring budget or roadmap look like for hiring in 2025? So in full disclosure, I work in a business that has a lot of confidential information shared. And that is something that, I take pride in maintaining confidentiality. So my goal in this conversation is not to name drop or share brand information, but really be able to share some of the trends that we're seeing and some of the indicators for what that job market's going to look like for 2025. Yeah. So,
I'm basically just going to pick your brain and help everybody else to understand all that knowledge. And as I said, if anybody does have any questions for Debbie as we go through, pop them up and I will bring them up for her. Okay. So what else, Debbie, about 2025?
So one of the areas that, we're really focused on, we work a lot with the indie brands, and for these brands that are under the 20 million mark, unfortunately, it's been challenging for some of these brands. When I look at just the overall conversations that I've had, I want to take a step back for a minute, across the board in the beauty industry. So 20 to 25% of these brands exceeded or met their performance for 2024. So that's majority of the brands either are flat or down for the year. So that is an indicator of what 2025 is going to look like. And then taking it back to those brands that are under the 20 million mark, they're very excited for 2025 in the sense that they see a lot of potential. However, some of these brands are cash strapped, and their main priority moving into next year in the first half is to get capital investment. They have every intention to hire. and to hire for marketing roles and sales positions, operations support, and really build out these teams for the next phase of growth. But that is going to be contingent on investment. So that's one area.
Do you think it's going to happen more kind of in Q2 rather than the first couple of months of 2025? Do you think it'll happen later on in the year after they've got that investment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they have some very targeted plans of what their growth looks like. So it is really contingent on that. And, the investments are happening. They're happened a lot slower this year. I mean, there's still an appetite, but the brand really does need to have that point of difference, and they need to demonstrate, that profitability. That is going to be key.
Perfect. Okay. What else?
And, one of the other areas we've seen a lot is these fractional executive roles. So that is something that got a lot of momentum this year for brands that couldn't afford an executive on a full-time basis. And the executives that I've spoke with, they want to make the investment into full-time hires. However, there's also a contingency. They want to see what the first half of the year looks like. So if they're able to, meet the performance objectives of the company the first half, they're going to feel more confident to take those salaries in-house. And those are also going to be executive level marketing roles, sales positions, some digital opportunities as well. But that is really going to be based on performance. And then what's interesting is that there's also, a group of brands that didn't even have a forecast for this year. They were looking at maybe 1 to 2 hires, and they had tremendous performance. And there's one example of a brand, she doubled her team this year, and that was not accounted for. So you have some non-committal that are going to hire, and this is a trend we've seen based on what the business needs are now. Where in the volume searches we saw in 21 and 22, there was a lot of hiring for projected growth, and that's just a major shift. I mean, cash is king, and all the brands are trying to conserve that. So that's definitely something we've also been seeing. And then you look at the brands that have met their performance or exceeded their performance, and they have aggressive hiring goals. They're, one brand, they're north of 100 million. They're planning to add in their 2025 across all of their functions of the company. So it's going to be leaders to mid director level positions as well. And that's exciting. And in addition, we've got some of these brands that have launched into retail. So they're in retail this year. They're looking to build out their field sales teams. They're looking to expand into trade marketing functions. And then we've got brands that are looking to make a retail play for 25 or 26. And they're going to be hiring sales leaders to be able to develop that strategy, execute it, and build out teams to support the business.
Wow. Okay. So from what it sounds like, there's caution, but it's optimistic next year. There seems to be, the projection is there will be jobs, there will be growth. People are looking to grow and develop. And so those jobs will be there, and it's cautiously more optimistic than 2024 was.
Absolutely. I do think they're going to be targeted. And I also think the other side of the business that we do a lot of searches with is contract manufacturer and the packaging. So the supplier side. There are many investments happening for U.S. manufacturing. And so the U.S. manufacturing that is coming into play for 2025 is going to yield positions in operations, sales, product development, and project management for the supplier side. And I do want to also mention that if you look at, every industry has about 15 to 20% turnover. And turnover is never something that is forecasted. And if you look at what happened in 2024, we saw a lot of CEOs turnover, and new CEOs came on board. They always, majority of the time rebuild their executive team, and those are not forecasted. So we were involved in a lot of those searches, and they do yield a lot of executive opportunities. So that's something else that we have to account for the future. So when I look at the market, it's going to be better than 2025. It's not going to be the volume that we had in 21 and 22, but there are a lot of opportunities. It is going to be competitive. There's going to be still, far more people than there are opportunities. So it's going to be really important that professionals really work on standing out.
Okay, fantastic. And we are going to give some kind of tips to help with that standing out in a second. But we have had a question. So Merck has asked, can we ask specific questions? So yes, you can ask specific questions, but obviously Debbie isn't going to break any confidences or any confidentiality. So if she feels that she can't answer a question fully or appropriately to maintain the confidentiality with the client, she will mention that. But yes, you can ask specific questions by all means. Okay, so we've got one question here for you, Debbie. So somebody said, do you think all the talk of tariffs is going to affect the beauty business and hiring?
There has been conversations, and it's a 50-50. Some executives are concerned, and some don't have that concern, quite frankly. So they're looking at, the beauty industry is a smaller piece of the pie. Is it going to be a main area that they concentrate on? Probably not. But that's to be determined. I mean, that goes down to, we look at TikTok, and that's another area that I want to talk about is, when we look at the trends that have been happening and kind of new opportunities that are opening up. I mean, we have this TikTok ban that may or may not happen. And I've had a lot of conversations around that. And the reality is probably it's a lot of complexity for that to actually get banned. But there are a lot of opportunities for people who have built an expertise in TikTok Shop. It's proven to be highly effective and a revenue producer for some brands. And their search is now for that specific skill set. And then you look at Amazon. So Amazon, yes, it's been around for a long time, but brands are really looking to capitalize, and it's becoming a very profitable channel, which is now producing Amazon Pacific positions on a strategic basis where you have a track record, where you've created profitable revenue, or just in-house teams that are managing the day-to-day. So there are also two kind of trending skill sets that we're starting to see more geared towards those areas.
Okay. And then within the beauty industry, are there any specific kind of categories where you're expecting kind of change next year?
Yeah, so if we look at so let me back up for 1 second. So managing trends, insights, data is always something that I really love doing. But also, when you look at, from a buyer perspective, when I hear where consumers are spending their money and what they're buying, I mean, those type of categories and opportunities, they yield new positions. And so we follow those very closely. So if we look at fragrance, which has been hot, and that was also highlighted in Ulta's third quarter earnings report. So there's certainly areas that the retailers are having high success in. But if you look at skincare, there's some of these brands that have really nailed down solving specific demographics problems, and they're on fire. And those are some of the ones that have some explosive hiring projections for next year. Professional skincare has also been an area we're seeing a lot of investments go in. And a lot of these professional skincare brands may not have they're not on the digital forefront. So they're investing in digital, they're investing in marketing executives. They're also looking to diversify in a channel perspective. So we've seen a lot of different searches we participated in, and we're planning to launch next year in that channel. In hair care, it isn't having the double-digit growth it was, but textured and hair color in some of the categories within it, and hair growth, there are still some players that are doing really well and are also going to be hiring next year.
Okay, fantastic. So we have had another question. So Mega's asked, international sales senior roles like VP of International or International Business Development, what does this situation look like? Are lots of US brands building teams for international growth?
Yes, there are. Great question. There are brands that is their goal for expansion. There's been, Europe's always a huge market. Asia is another market. There is growth plans, and especially when we have private equity or VC, I mean, they're looking to capitalize on any channel that's going to be proven to be profitable. And I think if you're an international sales executive, being able to highlight where you have successfully created profitable business is going to create opportunities for you.
Okay, fantastic. Very exciting. Okay, so keep those questions coming if you've got any more. But I do think now it's time to look at sort of what we can do to improve our situation. So why don't we start with brands? If it's such a competitive market, obviously you want to attract the best people to you. You want to attract the best person possible. What can brands do next year to make themselves more attractive?
Well, I think, there's always a lot of discussion around culture. Professionals more and more hone in on what is the culture. It's a question I go over in detail as I take pride in being an extension of the brands I represent. And I think if a brand can, especially for some of the smaller brands, they're trying to be profitable. That's not necessarily their top priority. But as they are building their brand story and tying in, 3 to 4 values that are layered within the organization, that are part of the onboarding process, and that will develop a culture and really attract the right talent that sees value in that. And it's been proven to also retain. And I would say the second is going to be job titles. So job titles are definitely something we've seen that are thrown around a lot, sometimes overinflated, 21, 22, a negotiation tool for some professionals. And we got to get back to, setting up a search successfully and having job titles that are equivalent to the comp. I mean, compensation at the end of the day, there's compensation bands that dictate certain levels within titles, and they also need to represent the functions. I think what we see often that doesn't work for either party is when you have an overinflated title, you hire a seasoned executive, and then they're not challenged, and it's not what they expected, and they turn over. So being able to really set that up successfully is a win-win for everybody involved.
Okay, so to sort of summarize, focusing on making sure that your culture and values are attractive to your employees, to keep those that are really good happy and keep your team stable, but also to attract future talent to give progression to there. And also around when we're doing that, when we're looking for new people, making sure that the job titles we're looking for are aligned around compensation and the things that they're expected to do to keep. Expectation it matters that you meet that expectation.
Absolutely. Yep. Make that consistent.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to candidates now, because, as we mentioned, there's some really exciting prospects that you've mentioned, that you're expecting next year. And I imagine there's going to be lots of people vying for those kind of roles. So we need to make sure that as a candidate, we're standing out, we're different from the competition. We make sure our CV or our resume gets to the top of the pile. What kind of things can you recommend for candidates?
So one, and this is just feedback that we've been getting this year, with searches being so targeted, there are specific problems brands are looking to solve, there's specific growth strategies they're looking to obtain. And some professionals, and especially ones that have dabbled in and done a lot of startup businesses, and even hyper-growth businesses, they tend to come in as a generalist. And I think that in today's market, being a generalist can often work against you if you're not honing in on your superpower, where you've made the impact, and be able to really have some quantifiable achievements. So that would be one area, is know your superpower. And yes, you could do everything, and that could come out as a benefit later down the road. But in the interview process, honing in specifically on what you're really good at and have a proven track record.
Okay, so with that, if I may just ask a quick question, if anyone else has got some, feel free. What would you say to those candidates who fear that by narrowing down and taking away that generalist thing, that they might miss out on potential roles? What would you say to them, candidates who say that?
Yeah, and I think that in the interview process is, starting off by presenting yourself and where your subject matter expertise, that can always be expanded upon. And if there's other goals or other problems that have been discussed in the interview process, certainly you can broaden the base. But I think having a targeted approach to where your expertise is and being to align with the company. And really, if you're working with a recruiter or you're working with an HR representative at a company, really understanding what they're trying to achieve with that hire is going to help you hone in on where your impact is and make sure that you're setting yourself up for success.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you very much. And what is your next tip for the candidates?
So next tip, very simple, but I do think in this market, with it being so competitive, is tailoring the resume. So I often hear the complaints of LinkedIn, aka the black hole, that you never hear anything from. And this is the reality, is that when the volume of resumes come in that are like 5x, 10x, it is time consuming, and a lot of the hiring managers, professionals, recruiters then go into key terms. If they're looking for an expert in a category, looking for an expert with Sephora experience or Ulta experience. So it sounds very basic, but being able to hone in on those keywords gives you a highly likelihood of converting it into an interview and then leading to the opportunity. So I think spending the extra time to do that will be beneficial.
So to do that, are you talking about taking kind of the job description and thinking, oh, I've got real key things there, and bigging that up in your resume? Is that what you're kind of doing, tailoring it to the job spec? Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. But highlighting the actual experience that the person has that is going to be relevant to the achievements and to the expectations of that job description, to maybe the hiring contact, if they had a pre-conversation about what they're bringing to the table, and make sure that you're tailoring the experience to what is applicable.
Okay. And then to balance that, because if you're applying for multiple jobs and you're kind of tailoring your resume each time, but then you do have a LinkedIn profile, which obviously you can't constantly tweak, how would you manage balancing the two so that they support each other, but if your resume is tweaked for individual roles?
What I'm not a fan is when people change their job title, so I'm not recommending that at all. But at the end of the day, for those who've spoken with me before, I'm very big on achievements. I do think there should be achievement section. I think achievement impacts where you've made impact, whether it's cost saving, whether it's being able to drive revenue and hit profitability. Those all need to be highlighted on your resume, need to be highlighted on your LinkedIn profile. It's the achievements that build your credibility that are going to get you to that interview or get you to the next step in that final round and hopefully an offer.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. So we are kind of coming towards the tail end of the show now. In a second, we're going to talk this, I think, probably the simplest tip that you've got and the most tangible, the one that people can do today to go away and make themselves the best kind of candidate for next year. But before then, Debbie, why don't you kind of explain a little bit about what people can expect from the show in 2025?
Absolutely. So in 2025, so in January, we're going to have Angela Bennett, who's an executive coach specialized in the beauty industry. And so we have very similar audiences. There's two audiences. There's one that is passively looking for their next opportunity, their next challenge. And then there's the active candidates that are actively looking for the next opportunity. Quite frankly, have found this job market to be one of the most challenging. And so we are going to focus the show on how to have a tailored and targeted approach to the job search, which works for both audiences. And for those that are actively looking, going through where there maybe needs to be flexibility in your job search to increase the opportunities leading to a result. In the overall show, I'm planning to have executives that have really unique stories and overcoming challenges and inspire so that we can not only learn, we can evolve, and ultimately when you thrive, we all thrive. And that's my goal. And for those who have worked with me know how much time and effort that I put into really being a true recruiting partner. And this show, I want to include you. If there's challenges you're having or if there's topics that would be very beneficial, I want to hear about it because I'd love to showcase that. And the goal really is to help our beauty community continue to evolve and be as successful as they can in their career.
Yes, it's you tapping your amazing network to kind of add as much value to your audience as possible. And I, for one, am very excited about 2025. Okay, so I think we're kind of coming to the end now. So as we spoke about, we like this last tip to be as tangible, as easy to implement as possible. So what is this last tip to make you stand out in this job market?
Absolutely. Very basic, but I don't see it as often as I'd like, is asking for recommendations on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is your digital version of your resume, and having somebody that can validate your impact, your achievements on some direct supervisor and executive, it builds automatic credibility. And the second part of this is that this is the reality. We all have disappointments. We have job interviews we didn't go well. We have the opportunity we really wanted, we didn't get. And there are low moments. And I do think that going back to those testimonials or those recommendations and being able to really help you bring back your confidence and just show you the value that you bring, it makes a big difference. So it's a little bit of a twofer as far as the recommendation that I have.
Perfect. Okay, now on that, do you recommend just kind of asking for the recommendations cold through LinkedIn, or do you think maybe you should get in contact and message them first or email somebody before you ask for it via LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think that if you want to have something that's going to be specific on where you've made an impact, have a conversation. I mean, we always want to keep our beauty contacts and keep those relationships close. Always warrants a conversation, and it gives them guidance on really what you're trying to achieve with that, which is going to give you the best result.
Okay, fantastic, amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, Debbie, thank you everybody who's kind of left comments. If you do have any that you want to slip in at the end, feel free to do so. But before then, Debbie, why don't you close out this first episode of the show?
Well, appreciate you joining. Thank you for your time, and looking forward to seeing you in 2025. Wishing everyone a happy holiday and an abundance of prosperity in the new year. See you in 2025.